All right, welcome everyone to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this masterclass on the very foundation of the natural world. Today, we're not just going to be memorizing a bunch of dry facts. Instead, we're going to unpack exactly how we know what we know about life on Earth. We'll dive into the science of biology, but more importantly, we're going to explore the incredible engine of discovery behind it. Let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. We're covering 1. The scope of biology, 2. Two types of reasoning, 3. The scientific method, 4. Basic versus applied science, and finally, 5. Sharing discoveries. By the end of this, you are going to have a master-level grip on these foundational concepts.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the scope of biology.
So, what actually is biology? At its core, biology is simply the study of living organisms and their interactions with one another and their environments. Now, I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but the scope of this natural science is literally unbelievable. Think about it. A biologist might spend their entire career peering through a microscope at the inner workings of a single tiny cell, or they might study massive, interconnected ecosystems that span the entire planet. It is the science of life in all its scales. And what's really wild is how biology jumps right out of the textbook and onto your daily newsfeed. This isn't just some abstract academic pursuit, it's happening all around us. When you read about an Escherichia coli or E. coli outbreak in the spinach at your local supermarket, well, that's biology. The massive global push to find cures for devastating diseases like AIDS, Alzheimer's, and cancer, that is absolutely biology. Even the planetary efforts to mitigate climate change and protect our ecosystems fall right under this umbrella. It quite literally impacts everything we do and everything we eat. Moving right along to Section 2, two types of reasoning. Let's look at how scientists actually think. Okay, so scientists want to understand the world, right? To do this, they basically rely on two main logical pathways. On one side, we have inductive reasoning. Think of this as a bottom-up approach. You start with related specific observations, like gathering a bunch of individual data points, and you use them to arrive at a broad, general conclusion. On the flip side, we have deductive reasoning. This is your top-down approach. You start with a general principle or law, and you use it to forecast specific, predictable results. So just remember, inductive builds up from the data, while deductive drills down from the law. I absolutely love this next example because it brilliantly illustrates the power of observation in inductive science. So back in the 1940s, a gentleman simply observed that these annoying little plant burrs were stubbornly sticking to his clothes and his dog's fur after a walk. Instead of just brushing them off and forgetting about it, he looked closer. He saw this tiny hook structure on the burrs, and he reasoned that this natural design was incredibly reliable. That specific observation led to a general application, which sparked the invention of the hook and loop fastener that we all know today as Velcro. A simple walk with a dog literally transformed into a massive, real-world innovation. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the scientific method, the structured protocol for discovery. Now, Sir Francis Bacon documented this highly structured protocol way back in the 16th century, but let's bring it down to earth to demystify the process. It really doesn't have to be complicated. Have you ever walked into a room on a Monday morning and thought, man, why is the classroom so warm? That right there, that is your observation, and it's your driving question. Let's actually solve that warm classroom problem step by step using the scientific method. We start with the observation, the room is warm. Next, we form a hypothesis, which is just a suggested explanation that we can actually test. Let's say our hypothesis is, the AC is off. From there, we make a prediction using a simple if-then statement. If I turn it on, then the room will cool down. Step 4 is the experiment. We walk over and check the AC switch. Finally, we get to our result. If the switch was off and we turn it on and boom, the room cools down, we accept our hypothesis. But if the switch was already on, we have to reject our hypothesis and come up with a new one. Maybe there's a power failure, right? The absolutely crucial point here is that a valid hypothesis must be testable and, just as importantly, it must be falsifiable. Science always has to be open to disproving ideas. Now, to execute these steps accurately, you've got to know the tools of the trade. To truly test a hypothesis, you must isolate what is actually causing your results, and you do this using variables and controls. A variable is any part of the experiment that can change, like whether that AC switch is flipped up or down. The control group, on the other hand, remains totally untouched. Think of it like this. If you had two identical warm rooms and you only flip the switch in one of them, that second untouched room is your control. If the experimental room cools down and the control room stays warm, you know for sure your manipulation was the exact cause. This is how scientists keep their experiments honest and precise. All right, shifting gears to section 4, basic versus applied science. Basically, why do we even do research in the first place? So there's this ongoing debate in the scientific community. On one side, we have basic science, which is sometimes called pure science. Its goal is to expand knowledge strictly for knowledge's sake, regardless of whether there's any short-term practical application for it. On the other side, we have applied science, often thought of as technology. Its entire aim is to solve defined real-world problems. Now, some people might ask, well, what's the point of basic science if it doesn't fix a problem right now? But here's the thing. Applied science heavily relies on the foundations built by basic science. I mean, you literally can't apply knowledge if you haven't discovered it yet. This is one of my absolute favorite stories because it shows exactly how this relationship works. Scottish biologist Alexander Fleming accidentally left a petri dish of Staphylococcus bacteria open on his desk. A messy desk actually led to a miracle. Seriously. An unwanted mold grew in that dish and just started killing the bacteria. This was pure serendipity in a basic science setting. But Fleming had a curious, observant mind. He investigated it, and that basic curiosity directly led to the discovery of the antibiotic penicillin. A lucky surprise in pure research led to literally one of the most life-saving applied science breakthroughs in all of human history. 13. It took 13 years of intense, global collaborative effort to complete the Human Genome Project. Researchers mapped every single human chromosome, relying purely on basic research. They were initially studying very simple organisms just to understand how genes worked at a fundamental level. But once that basic foundation of knowledge was mapped out over those 13 long years, it opened the floodgates for applied research. It allowed us to start seeking cures and early diagnoses for genetically related diseases. Basic science paved the road that applied science drives on today. And finally, section 5, sharing discoveries. Let's talk about how we spread this knowledge. Look, a groundbreaking discovery doesn't do anyone much good if it just stays locked away in a lab somewhere. The answer to this is publication, specifically through a peer-reviewed manuscript. This is the ultimate quality control mechanism in the scientific world. Before a discovery is fully accepted by the community, the researcher has to write it up and submit it to a scientific journal. Think of it kind of like turning in a major final essay, but instead of one teacher grading it, it's anonymously reviewed by the absolute smartest kids in the class, your peers. They pick it apart to ensure the experiment was logical, the research is original, and the conclusions are thorough. This ensures that experimental results are actually consistent and, most importantly, can be reproduced by other people. And, scientists don't write these papers like a thriller novel. They use a super specific, standardized structure known as the IMRAD format. It's basically the ultimate scientific study guide. It stands for Introduction, where you provide the background and rationale for your work, Materials and Methods, where you detail exactly what substances and techniques you used so someone else can repeat your exact experiment, Results, where you narrate your raw findings using tables and graphs, and finally, Discussion, where you interpret what those results actually mean and how all your variables relate to one another. It's a highly precise way of communicating really complex truths. Wow, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the grand scope of biology all the way down to the rigorous structures of peer review. But remember, science isn't just for people wearing white coats in a laboratory. It is a lens for viewing the entire world around you. So, I want to leave you with this final question. The next time you face a frustrating everyday problem, how will you use observation, hypotheses, and experimentation to logically solve it? The next great discovery might just start with you asking why. Thanks so much for joining me.